Chapter 14 of the Boy Scouts in Russia by John Blaine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Kangaroo. Altered Plans. Fred's horse did for him what he could scarcely have done for himself in time. It reared and threw him, then bolted. Tired already, the sudden appearance of the monstrous ray of light and the roar of the approaching motor was too much for that horse. Fred was not hurt by the fall. Having had no stirrups from which to disengage his feet, he was able to let himself go. And he had no sooner landed than he was up. For just a moment, he knew he must be plainly visible in the glare of the searchlight, but he dashed for the side of the road and made his way through a hedge and into the field on the other side. There he began to run as fast and as hard as he could. He had two chances, he thought. One, that he had not been seen at all. The other, that whoever was in the car might think he had passed on the flying horse. If he had been seen, however, he could not hope to escape by running. He was too tired, for one thing, and the strenuous experience of the previous night, and for another, he was almost certain to be seen, for after he had traversed a space that was covered with shrubs and young trees, he would be in the open, and a bullet could travel faster than he could. And so, after making his dash, he stopped running and threw himself down, facing the road, to watch and to listen. At first he thought he was safe, for the car roared by. But in a moment, his ear caught a different note in the sound of the motor, and then the engine stopped. It started again for a moment, but now the headlight was coming toward him again. The car had been turned around. It was back undoubtedly to look for him. Still he decided not to run, but to stay where he was, though every instinct prompted him to take that chance of flight. That, however, was pure panic, and he fought against the impulse. The car came along slowly. He was not more than 100 feet from the road, and the headlight showed him the progress of the car. Its blinding light, however, made it impossible for him to see the car itself, or its occupants. It gave them the advantage. Finally, the car stopped, and he groaned. It had stopped exactly opposite his hiding place. He had hoped that they would not be able to tell just where he had left the road. But in a moment, the explanation came to him. He had trampled down the hedge in getting through, of course, and had left a trail that a child might have followed. Then the headlight was switched off, and for a moment he lost the car altogether. His ears, rather than his eyes, told him that someone was coming. He heard the breaking down of the hedge, and then footsteps moving slowly, but coming closer. And in a moment, he saw a little stabbing ray of light that wandered back and forth. Whoever was stalking him evidently was not afraid of him. Suddenly, he remembered his pistol, the one he had taken from Schmidt's holster. He gripped it convulsively. After all, he was not as helpless as he had believed. He waited. Should he risk all now with a shot that might warn his stalker off and give him another chance to escape, even though there were others in the car? He drew out the pistol and cocked it. Then, at the faint sound, a voice called to him out of the darkness. "Do not fire. It is I, Ivan Ivanovich." For a moment Fred thought he was going to collapse, so great was the relief and the slackening of tension. He did laugh out, but caught himself at once. "Ivan," he said. "I thought it was a German officer." "It is I, Ivan. Fred Waring." "I knew it," said Ivan, coming up close. "I saw you for just a second as your horse reared. It was just a flash of your face, but if I have ever seen a face once, I never forget it. And you have the look of a Suvaroff about you, even though you are different. I would have known you for one of the breed had I met you anywhere in the world, had no one told me who you were, and so I turned to find and follow you. But what are you doing here? I thought you were to rejoin our army. I was pressed into service as a chauffeur. This car was needed near the front, and there was no one to drive it. I deceived them wholly with my uniform and my motorcycle, and so they forced this car upon me. My plan was to use it instead of my cycle to get past their lines. But you are riding straight to Goodwin, and they are near there in force. No, they have retreated from there. They know that we are too strong for them, and they do not care to fight. Yes, and do you know why? Because they have bringing up troops secretly to Insterburg, and are planning to fight a great battle there on their own grounds. You were wrong, Ivan, in the information you sent. Wasting no words, he quickly told of what he had learned that evening, and Ivan smote his hands together, for he was deeply troubled. And I thought I knew all their plans, he said savagely. If the staff had acted upon my information, we should have marched into a trap. Now I must get to the wireless, said Fred. That was what I meant to do when you frightened my horse there in the road. Come, I will drive you back. It will not take long, and your work is more important than mine now. It is safe, too. You can be hidden in the car in case we encounter any Germans. But that is not likely. They are not as thick in this district as they were 48 hours ago. They made their way together to the car, and Fred laughed. I don't think I was ever so scared as when you turned and came back. It was worse, in a way, than when they were going to shoot me in the parsonage garden. I'd been so sure I was safe, and then to hear that bugle call on your car. It is not right for you to run such risks, said Ivan. I wish you were behind our lines. You aren't even a Russian, and yet you have been near to death for us. Don't you worry about me, said Fred. I don't suppose that I would have started this, but when I was pushed into it, as I was, I feel like doing all I can. If the Germans had caught me when Boris had hid me in the tunnel, they would have treated me like an enemy, so I thought I might as well give them a good excuse, since they were not going to do it anyhow. Here we are. Even if you were frightened, this may turn out well. You will save some time, and I can take you to the very opening of the tunnel. Well, it's only fair for this car to do me a good turn after the fright it gave me, said Fred. Ivan drove swiftly when they started again, on that deserted road through a country that had been blasted by the approach of war. Though as yet there had been no actual fighting, there was no reason for cautious driving, and 5 minutes brought them to the parsonage, and so to a point as close to the opening of the tunnel as the car could go. As the motor stopped, Ivan swore in surprise. Look, he said. To the west, there were a dozen darting searchlights winking back and forth across the somber sky, and below the searchlights were hundreds of tiny points of war. They're advancing, he cried. And listen! From the east, there came a dull sound that rose presently to a steady, loud roar. Everything has changed, cried Ivan, his face white. We are pushing the attack. We must have occupied Goodwin. The Germans are being driven back, and they are bringing up their supports. They must mean to fight here to protect the railway. This place will be the center of a battle before morning. I shall give up my plan. The only thing that counts now is to get the word to the staff of what is going on back here. Come. What about the car? If it is still here after we have sent word, good. If it is not, we must do without it. Ivan began running toward the mouth of the tunnel, but Fred, before he followed, switched off the lights and ran the car off the side of the road, so that it was under the wall of the parsonage garden and sheltered, to a certain extent, by the heavy foliage of a large tree whose branches overhung the wall. "I'd like to think that the car was where we could get at it," he said to himself. "I have an idea that this place is going to be mighty unpleasant before long." Then he followed Ivan. The Russian had already entered the tunnel. Fred, when he followed him, heard him running up the long passage that led to the house. Before he could reach the opening, however, he heard other steps coming toward him, and a moment later Boris was heaping reproaches on him. "I thought they had caught you," he cried. "I saw them chasing someone, and it looked like you. In fact, I was sure it was you at first sight." "It was," said Fred grimly. "I'll tell you about that later, Boris. You'd better get everyone out of this place. We can't stay here any longer. Unless I am greatly mistaken, this will be used as a target for artillery by morning. It will if Ivan is right. He rushed by me just now. He would say nothing except that you were behind. He's at the wireless. Come on, we'll see if he has found out anything more." For 10 minutes after they reached the turret, they could get nothing out of Ivan, who was sending hard, with only an occasional pause to listen to what the other operator sent to him. Then he sat back with a sigh of relief. "We were in time," he said. "These troops back here are the ones that were supposed to be massing behind Lyack, to resist the feint we were making here. They are too clever, those Germans. They have their airships to tell them the truth, and their railways to move men swiftly from one side to another. But they have not enough men. We shall beat them yet. Our attack will stop. See? Look here." He moved to a table, and with pens and pencils made a rough diagram of the position. "They gave up Gumbinnen without a fight, and formed in a half circle behind. They had so few men there that it was an invitation to us to try to outflank them. Our right could sweep out and draw in behind their left, so. And then their supporting troops could outflank our right, in turn, and it would be caught between two fires. They have fewer troops than we in East Prussia today, but ours are separated, while they risked all to bring theirs together at this one point and left the south unguarded from Malawa to Lyack. Oh, it was daring. Napoleon might have planned that." "I see," said Fred. "Then, when they had won here, they could have used their railway to move troops southward?" "Exactly so. 150,000 men altogether can beat 100,000, if all else is equal. But one army of 100,000 can beat two of 70,000 apiece, meeting them at different times. So our attacker will stop. We shall leave a covering force here at Gumbinnen, or perhaps all our troops will stay, but on the defensive, while others are rushed up from Grodno to outflank them, not on their right, as they hoped, but on their extreme left." He was silent for a moment. "I need one man here," he said. "One man to keep the engine running for the dynamo. Everyone else must leave this house. You, Boris Petrovitch. Most of all, you and your cousin. I am responsible to your father for your safety, for it is through my fault that the plans were badly made." "But why must you stay, Ivan?" asked Boris. "I must stay until I am ordered away," said Ivan. "But it will not be safe here after daylight. Perhaps there will be trouble even before that. Yes, I think it will be very soon now." "Well, I think I shall stay," said Fred. "No," said Ivan. "Listen. If you go now, quickly, you can get away in the car. Here is the road you must follow." He took a map and pointed. "See? Swing west first. and then south, far south. So you will be safe from the Germans, for they have abandoned that section, except for the railway from Insterburg to Liek. That is guarded, but thinly. In the car, there are 2 long coats, such as the German officers wear, and 2 helmets. They are under the rear seat. Put those on, and you will pass most of their sentries, if you should encounter them. If he says we must go, we must do it, said Boris quickly. I should like to stay too, Fred, but he is right. We can do no good here. And if you are caught, it will be very bad. It would not matter for me, for they would treat me only as a prisoner. Fred was still unwilling. He had not Boris's Russian readiness to accept whatever came, but there was something about Ivan that convinced him the argument would be useless. Go now, said Ivan, and God go with you. I will see to it that Vladimir and the others follow. And so Fred went through the tunnel again, this time with Boris. He wondered if he would ever see this place again. End of chapter 14. Recording by Kangaroo.